Ethan Caldwell's face was everywhere: billboards, magazines, the silver screen, but no one knew the real him. For years, he'd buried his truth beneath a carefully crafted persona, a Hollywood heartthrob whose smile could sell out theaters. Tonight, at the Oscars, he was about to shatter that illusion. The Dolby Theater buzzed with anticipation. Ethan, in a tailored black tuxedo, sat in the front row, his heart pounding like a drum roll. Cameras panned across the sea of celebrities, their sequin gowns and polished smiles gleaming under the lights. Ethan's latest film, Eclipsed Hearts, was up for Best Picture, and he was nominated for Best Actor. The world saw him as the golden boy of Hollywood, a 32-year-old star with a string of blockbusters and a fan base that worshipped him. But beneath the charm, Ethan was suffocating. He'd spent a decade hiding who he loved, and the weight of that secret was crushing him. He glanced at his phone, hidden in his palm. A text from Caleb glowed on the screen. "You've got this. Be you." Caleb, his quiet anchor, the man who'd been his secret for 3 years. Ethan's fingers tightened around the phone, his mind racing. Tonight wasn't just about winning an Oscar. It was about winning himself back. Ethan hadn't always been a liar. Growing up in a small Ohio town, he'd been the kid who dreamed of the stage, memorizing lines from old movies while his classmates played football. His parents, devout and rigid, saw his passion as a phase, something he'd outgrow. When he came out to them at 17, their silence was louder than any rejection. "We love you," his mother had said, "but this isn't God's plan." Ethan left home the next day, a backpack slung over his shoulder, determined to make it in Hollywood. He'd prove them wrong, not just about his talent, but about who he was. Los Angeles was a different beast. At 22, Ethan landed his first big role, a charming rogue in a summer action flick. The audience fell in love, and so did the studios. His agent, Marissa, a sharp-tongued powerhouse, saw dollar signs in his blue eyes and chiseled jaw. "You're the all-American dream," she'd told him. "Don't mess it up with anything controversial." The subtext was clear: being gay wasn't part of the brand. Ethan, desperate to keep his career, agreed to the unspoken rules. He smiled for the cameras, dated actresses for publicity, and kept his heart locked away. Then he met Caleb. It was 2 years ago, on the set of Eclipsed Hearts. Caleb was a cinematographer, quiet and unassuming, with a knack for capturing beauty in the smallest moments. During a late-night shoot, when the crew was exhausted and the director was screaming, Caleb had handed Ethan a cup of coffee and said, "You look like you need this more than I do." It was a simple gesture, but it cracked something open in Ethan. They started talking about films, dreams, the way the light hits the ocean at dusk. Soon, those talks turned into stolen moments, then secret dates in tucked-away diners and rooftop hideouts. Caleb was the first person who saw Ethan, not the star, but the man. But love came with a cost. Ethan's fame grew, and so did the scrutiny. Paparazzi hounded him. Fans dissected his every move, and Marissa orchestrated his life like a chess game. "No scandals," she'd say, eyeing him like she knew something. Ethan and Caleb became experts at hiding. Never too close in public, never photographed together. It was a life of half-truths, and it was tearing Ethan apart. Back at the Oscars, the host's voice boomed, announcing the nominees for Best Actor. Ethan's face appeared on the massive screen, a clip from Eclipsed Hearts playing to thunderous applause. In the scene, he was raw, vulnerable, a man confessing love against all odds. The irony wasn't lost on him. He poured his own heart into that role, channeling his unspoken feelings for Caleb. The audience didn't know that, but Caleb did. Ethan stole a glance at the wings, where Caleb stood among the crew, his eyes steady and proud. The envelope was opened, and the Oscar goes to Ethan Caldwell. The room erupted. Ethan stood, his legs unsteady, as the spotlight burned into him. He walked to the stage, the weight of 1,000 eyes on his back. This was it, the moment he'd planned for weeks, the moment he dreaded and craved. He gripped the golden statuette, its weight grounding him. The applause faded, and the world went quiet in his ears. He looked out at the crowd, producers, directors, fans who'd made him star. Then he thought of Caleb, waiting in the shadows. Ethan's voice trembled as he began. "Thank you," he said, his words steadying. "This means more than you know. But there's something I need to say." The room stilled, sensing something big. Ethan's heart raced, but he pushed forward. "For years, I played roles, on screen and off. I've hidden who I am to fit an image. But I'm done hiding. I'm gay, and I'm in love with an incredible man." Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of his expression. Ethan didn't care. He felt lighter, freer, like he could breathe for the first time in years. "His name is Caleb," he continued, "and he's taught me what it means to be brave. This award is for him." The silence broke into a mix of cheers and murmurs. Some faces beamed, others looked stunned. Ethan stepped off the stage, his heart soaring, knowing he'd just changed everything. The backstage chaos hit Ethan like a tidal wave. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrusting toward him, their questions a blur of excitement and accusation. "Ethan, why now? Who's Caleb? Is this a publicity stunt?" He clutched the Oscar, its edges digging into his palm, and pushed through the crowd, his eyes searching for Caleb. He found him near the crew exit, his face pale, but his smile unwavering. They didn't touch. Not here, not yet, but their eyes locked, saying everything words couldn't. Outside, Los Angeles was alive with flashbulbs and shouts. Ethan and Caleb slipped into a waiting car, the tinted windows shielding them from the frenzy. As the driver pulled away, Caleb reached for Ethan's hand. "You did it," he whispered. Ethan nodded, but his chest tightened. He'd opened a door he couldn't close, and the fallout was coming. By morning, the internet was a battlefield. Ethan Caldwell Out trended worldwide. Fans posted heartfelt messages of support, sharing stories of their own struggles. Others were vicious, calling him a fraud, a sellout, a disappointment. Blogs dissected his career, speculating on every past relationship. Marissa called at dawn, her voice sharp. "You've just made my job a nightmare, Ethan. Meet me at the office." Now, Marissa's office was a sleek fortress of glass and steel, overlooking Sunset Boulevard. She sat behind her desk, her expression a mix of fury and calculation. "Do you know what you've done?" she asked, tossing her phone onto the desk. It displayed a headline. "Hollywood's Golden Boy Comes Out. Career Suicide?" Ethan stood tall, refusing to flinch. "I told the truth," he said. "I'm not apologizing for that." Marissa leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You think this is about truth? This is about money, Ethan. Studios are already pulling back. Sponsors are nervous. You're a brand, and you just broke it." She sighed, softening slightly. "I've fought for you for years. But this? You should have warned me." Ethan's jaw tightened. He wanted to tell her, but he knew she'd try to stop him. "I couldn't keep lying, Marissa. Not to myself, not to Caleb." Her gaze softened at Caleb's name, but only for a moment. "Fine," she said. "We'll manage this. Press conferences, interviews, damage control. But you need to be ready for the consequences." The consequences came fast. A major studio dropped Ethan from an upcoming action film, citing scheduling conflicts. Tabloids ran lurid stories, some claiming he'd been living a double life for years. His parents called, their voices heavy with disappointment. "We're praying for you," his mother said, as if his love for Caleb was a sin to be fixed. Each blow stung, but Ethan held on to Caleb's quiet strength. They spent evenings in Caleb's small apartment, cooking dinner, watching old movies, pretending the world wasn't watching. Caleb was Ethan's safe harbor, but he wasn't immune to the storm. As a cinematographer, he worked behind the scenes, unnoticed by most. Now, his name was splashed across headlines, his face plastered on gossip sites. Colleagues whispered, some supportive, others cold. One night, as they lay in bed, Caleb admitted, "I didn't sign up for this, Ethan. I love you, but it's a lot." Ethan's heart sank. He dragged Caleb into his spotlight, and now they were both burning. "I'll fix this," Ethan promised, pulling Caleb close. But how? He couldn't undo the Oscars speech. He couldn't stop the world from judging. All he could do was fight for their future. He started by agreeing to an exclusive interview with a major network, one known for fairness. Marissa coached him relentlessly. But Ethan had one condition. Caleb would be there, too. The interview was live, broadcast to millions. Ethan and Caleb sat side by side, their hands clasped under the table. The host, a seasoned journalist named Laura Chun, asked pointed but respectful questions. "Ethan, why did you hide this for so long?" she asked. Ethan took a breath, his voice steady. "Fear. Fear of losing my career, my fans, my family. But hiding who I am was killing me. Caleb gave me the courage to stop." Caleb spoke next, his voice soft but firm. "I'm not here to be a headline. I'm here because I love him, and I believe love shouldn't be a secret." The words hit Ethan hard, grounding him. The interview went viral, with millions praising their honesty. For the first time, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. The interview shifted the tide, but not without cost. Ethan's social media was a war zone, supportive messages drowned out by hate. Death threats arrived, some so graphic Marissa hired security. Ethan and Caleb moved to a gated rental, their lives now a maze of precautions. Yet, amidst the chaos, something beautiful emerged: letters. Fans, especially young queer people, wrote to Ethan, sharing how his speech gave them hope. One letter, from a 16-year-old boy in Texas, read, "I was scared to be me. You showed me it's possible." Ethan kept that letter on his nightstand, a reminder of why he'd spoken out. But the industry was less forgiving. A director Ethan admired, known for gritty dramas, called to say his next project was on hold. The subtext was clear. Studios were wary of casting an openly gay leading man in mainstream films. Marissa fought for him, securing a role in an indie drama, but it paid a fraction of his usual fee. "Take it," she urged. "Show them you're still a star." Ethan agreed, but the rejection stung. He'd worked his whole life for this career, and now it felt like sand slipping through his fingers. Caleb, too, faced fallout. A high-profile director he'd worked with for years stopped returning his calls. "They think I'm a distraction," Caleb told Ethan one night, frustration in his voice. They were on their rooftop, the same one where they'd shared countless quiet moments. The city glittered below, but the magic felt dimmed. "I don't regret you," Caleb added, squeezing Ethan's hand. "But I didn't expect to lose my career, too." Ethan's guilt was a heavy weight. He'd chosen to come out, but Caleb was paying the price. "I'll make this right," Ethan said, his voice fierce. He began reaching out to allies in the industry, actors, producers, anyone who might listen. Some brushed him off, but others, like Sarah Lynn, a rising director known for her bold storytelling, responded. "I want you for my next film," she told him over coffee. "Not because of the headlines, but because you're damn good." It was a lifeline, a chance to rebuild. Ethan threw himself into the indie film, a raw story about a man grappling with identity. The role felt like an extension of himself, and he poured his heart into it. Caleb, too, found solace in work, landing a gig on Sarah's crew. They were a team again, creating art in a world that didn't always understand them. Off-set, they attended quiet dinners with friends, building a small but fierce circle of support. Ethan began to see a future, not the one he'd planned, but one that felt real. The premiere of the indie film was a modest affair, far from the glitz of the Oscars. Ethan and Caleb arrived together, no longer hiding. Cameras flashed, but this time, Ethan didn't flinch. The film was a critical hit, with reviewers praising Ethan's raw, fearless performance. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it was a start. For the first time in months, Ethan felt like he was moving forward. Then came the call that changed everything. The Academy invited Ethan to present at the next Oscars, a gesture of goodwill, or perhaps a calculated move to show progress. Ethan hesitated. Returning to that stage meant facing the world that had both cheered and condemned him. Caleb was the one who convinced him. "You started this," he said, his eyes steady. "Go finish it." As the next Oscars approached, Ethan prepared a speech, not for an award, but for a moment. He wanted to speak to those still hiding, to those fighting for acceptance. He and Caleb spent nights crafting it, their words a blend of hope and defiance. The night before the ceremony, they stood on their rooftop, the city sprawling beneath them. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Ethan said, pulling Caleb close, "I'm proud of us." Caleb smiled, his voice soft. "So am I." The Dolby Theater was a familiar beast, its lights and cameras no less intimidating a year later. Ethan stood backstage, his palms sweaty, the weight of the moment pressing down. He wasn't here to accept an award, but to present one, Best Supporting Actor. Yet everyone knew this was more than a routine appearance. The world was watching, waiting to see if Ethan Caldwell was still Hollywood's golden boy or a cautionary tale. Caleb was in the audience this time, not hidden in the wings. Ethan had insisted on it, buying him a seat in the front row. As the ceremony began, Ethan caught Caleb's eye, a silent promise passing between them. The host introduced Ethan to applause that felt cautious, mixed. He stepped onto the stage, the spotlight hot on his skin, and smiled. Not the polished grin of a star, but the real one he'd learned to wear. "Good evening," he began, his voice clear. "A year ago, I stood here and told the world who I am. It wasn't easy, but it was right." The audience leaned in, some nodding, others unreadable. "Tonight, I'm here to celebrate stories, stories that challenge us, that show us who we can be." He presented the award, his hand steady, but his heart was in the words he'd spoken. As he left the stage, the applause was louder, warmer. Not everyone agreed with him, but they were listening. Backstage, Ethan was mobbed, not by reporters but by colleagues. Actors he'd admired, directors he'd never worked with, all offering quiet words of respect. Sarah Lynn was there, her grin wide. "You're changing the game, Ethan," she said. "Keep going." He nodded, overwhelmed, and searched for Caleb. They found each other in a quiet corner, away from the chaos. "You were perfect," Caleb said, pulling him into a hug. For a moment, the world was just them. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Ethan's speech, though brief, sparked a new wave of conversation. Industry leaders began to shift, some cautiously, others boldly. A major studio approached Ethan for a romantic drama, a love story between two men, with a budget that rivaled blockbusters. It wasn't a guaranteed hit, but it was a statement. Ethan signed on, with Caleb as cinematographer. They were building something together, not just as a couple, but as artists. But not everyone was ready to move forward. Ethan's parents remained distant, their calls rare and strained. At a family reunion in Ohio, Ethan attended alone, hoping to bridge the gap. His mother hugged him, but her eyes were guarded. "We're trying," she said. His father said nothing. Ethan left feeling raw, but not broken. He had Caleb, and he had himself. As the new film began production, Ethan and Caleb found a rhythm. Long days on set gave way to quiet nights, their love a steady anchor. The script was powerful, a story of two men navigating a world that wasn't always kind. Ethan felt every line, every glance, as if it were his own life on the page. Caleb's camera captured it with the same care he'd always shown Ethan, seeing the truth in the smallest moments. One evening, after a grueling shoot, they walked through Griffith Park, the city lights distant below. Ethan stopped, turning to Caleb. "I used to think success was about fame, about winning," he said. "But it's this. It's us being here, being real." Caleb's eyes softened. "You're my Oscar," he said, and they laughed, the sound carrying into the night. The film wrapped, and early buzz was strong. Critics called it groundbreaking, a love story that didn't shy away from truth. Ethan and Caleb attended the premiere hand in hand, their love no longer a secret but a statement. The audience gave a standing ovation, and Ethan felt a weight lift, not just from himself, but from everyone who'd ever felt they had to hide. The premiere was a triumph, but Ethan knew the real work was just beginning. The film, Light in the Shadows, became a cultural touchstone, sparking conversations about love, identity, and acceptance. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it didn't need to be. It reached the people who needed it most, those who saw themselves in Ethan and Caleb's story. Letters poured in again, from kids in small towns, from parents learning to understand, from couples who'd found the courage to live openly. Each one was a reminder that Ethan's choice at the Oscars had rippled far beyond Hollywood. Life wasn't perfect. Hate mail still arrived, and some studios remained hesitant to cast Ethan in big-budget roles. But others embraced him, and his career found a new path, less about flash, more about substance. He and Caleb became advocates, speaking at events, supporting organizations for queer youth. They didn't set out to be heroes, but they became them for those who needed hope. One spring evening, Ethan and Caleb returned to their rooftop, the one that had witnessed their quiet moments and their storms. The city sparkled below, as it always had, but now it felt like theirs. Ethan pulled out a small box, his hands trembling. "Caleb," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've been my courage, my home. Will you marry me?" Caleb's eyes widened, then softened with a smile. "You know I will," he said, pulling Ethan into a kiss. The ring, simple and silver, caught the moonlight as Ethan slipped it onto Caleb's finger. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the world's noise fading away. Their wedding was small, in a quiet garden outside Los Angeles. Friends and allies surrounded them, including Sarah Lynn, who'd become a close friend. Ethan's parents didn't attend, but his sister did, her eyes teary as she hugged him. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Years later, Ethan and Caleb sat in their living room, watching the Oscars. A young actor, openly queer, won Best Actor and thanked his partner in a speech. Ethan squeezed Caleb's hand, a smile spreading across his face. "We helped make that possible," he said. Caleb nodded, his eyes bright. "You did." Their life was quieter now, but no less full. Ethan took on roles that mattered, stories that challenged and inspired. Caleb's cinematography won awards, his vision shaping films that spoke to the heart. They built a home together, not just a house, but a life where love was the foundation. Ethan often thought back to that Oscar night, the moment he'd stepped into the truth. It had cost him roles, relationships, the illusion of safety. But it had given him so much more. Caleb, a purpose, a legacy. He'd once feared the world would reject him, but he'd learned it could also embrace him. And in that embrace, he'd found freedom. As the credits rolled on the Oscar broadcast, Ethan leaned against Caleb, their hands intertwined. The journey hadn't been easy, but it was theirs, and it was worth it.